Hello, it's been a while since we've done one of these ed puzzles where you have me kind of going over some lessons with you. Over the last few weeks, you've been doing some of the AP exam review lessons with the instructors through the College Board's YouTube channel, which I thought was a good way for you to kind of get some feedback and some ideas from other AP instructors so that it's not the same voice. But at the same time, I would much rather be doing this as opposed to watching someone else kind of present the material. So what we're doing here, in order to still continue to get you ready for the AP exam, is go over a couple components with actually writing your essays. You have already done some things with the Abigail Adams prompt, and thankfully, from your perspective, we're not going to be doing anything else with Abigail Adams. But in the upcoming future, probably next week, I'm going to have you do a TWA for a passage that would be pre 20th century, obviously rhetorical analysis, where you would be doing, an analysis of speech, letter, some kind of passage along those lines, and being aware of the rhetorical situation for that sophistication point, which you were going over with Abigail Adams, would be a point of emphasis, as well as identifying and analyzing the rhetorical devices. But I think one part of rhetorical analysis essays and TWAs in general, but also even kind of take-home essays, continue to be introductory paragraphs and conclusions. So I have a video this week, obviously today, of us taking a look at introductory paragraphs, and then also later on in the week we'll be doing one where we take a look at conclusions. So just trying to give you some ways, thinking within a TWA mindset as to how you could go about writing a successful introductory paragraph. But some of this material could also certainly carry over to, take-home essays, formal essays that you would have in the future, even though it's not, obviously going to be with me at this point in time within the year. The material that I'm pulling from is coming from the YouTube channel the College Board put out. So in fact, the introductory paragraph lesson that we have here was one that was presented by Mrs. Valadis, who did the first three Abigail Adams videos for her. So I give her credit here for the content and the concepts that are being presented, but I think it's good information to get passed on to you. And in some ways, the learning situation that we've been put in here with remote learning has kind of forced the College Board to really release a lot more material before an exam than I think they would have otherwise. So it's a little bit of me being a student as well and kind of picking up on some of the things that they are looking for within the essays, especially given the rubric that you're dealing with this year. So maybe not the best of circumstances, but I think it does kind of give us a way to take a look at some more resources than we otherwise would have. So today's emphasis, looking at the AP prompt, rhetorical analysis, but specifically introductory paragraphs, all right? And really, for the most part, I think introductions break down into two categories. You're going to have those that are good intros, and you're going to have those that are great. A good intro, is exactly what it states it is. It's good. It gets the job done. This would be something that is delivering the task. It's needed. So it has the essentials. You have the thesis statement. You have a general context of what's kind of going on within the passage, and that's becoming clear to the reader that the writer understood what he or she read and can communicate the argument. So it's reflecting a competent job, of the task that's at hand to analyze a passage. It's probably done fairly quickly. It's probably not something that's getting a lot of thought that's going into it. It could be done quickly for a couple reasons. Time just being a factor where you have an essay to write, in this case in 45 minutes, so it's only going to be 2 to 3 sentences. It also could be done quickly because you might be trying to figure out the passage at this point. There are going to be some passages where you read and an argument isn't coming to mind right away. And so you just kind of write down an introduction quickly so that you can get into the meat and potatoes of the analysis of the essay and really try to figure things out as you're doing that. So I have the picture on here of spaghetti, which I like, and this is a nice looking dinner. If Mrs. Kane and the family and I were going to be having a spaghetti dinner, everyone would be happy. There wouldn't really be any complaints. It's easy to do. It's a quick dinner. It's not something that's going to be too time consuming, and everyone's going to eat it and be happy. A great intro is going to be steak, for me at least. It's going to be a nicely grilled steak. It's going to be medium rare, as you can see there, with the French fries. It's a presentation. It's a big piece of meat. Looks good. There's enrichment that's going on. There's more nutrients, to this meal than maybe with the spaghetti. And it's going to make me feel enriched as a reader coming across a great introduction. A great introduction probably takes more time. You're looking at 3 to 5 sentences. And even in some cases, maybe a little bit more, probably 4 or 5 or 6, but it can be done in 3. It probably is going to take more time than what writing just a couple sentences would be, but at the same time, you don't want to take too much time because there's body body paragraphs, at least two, that still need to be completed. But it's going to take a little bit more time, and that additional time should reflect then some more sophistication. So you're going beyond the basics of simply stating who the author is, the audience, the thesis statement, but you're providing some kind of enrichment, some kind of contextualization that is going beyond what the typical essay is doing. And if you think about it, really a great introduction, this is like an opening chapter to a book or the first few minutes of a movie or a TV show. It makes you want to continue to read on with the essay. It makes you want to continue with the task. There's something being presented from the writer that is simply illustrating that they are getting more out of the passage and recognize more from the passage than what the typical writer is doing. Now, keep in mind, if you do a good intro, the job is going to be done. You're still passing the essay. It's not to say that a good intro, in this case, is a limitation and is going to cause the essay to be poor. It can still be quite successful, but it just doesn't stack up to what a great introduction can do. And, conversely, a great intro doesn't mean that the whole entire essay is necessarily going to be wonderful. If that essay takes too much time, or if that introduction takes too much time, then the analysis is probably going to be limited. But if it is reflecting sophistication early on and an understanding of the passage, chances are that sophistication should then carry over into the rest of the body paragraph. So there's some obvious benefits to having a great introduction if this information is coming to you. When you think about what needs to go into that introduction for rhetorical analysis, and I don't think really a whole lot of this is going to be brand new, you're introducing the subject and or the writer of that argument to the reader. So more often than not, it's going to be the writer, but there might be some instance about the subject material of the passage that has to kind of be introduced. But you're introducing that. You're obviously presenting the argument's thesis. And so since it's rhetorical analysis, we would be taking a look here at a SPA, where we have strategy and purpose and argument equals that thesis. And that's really kind of like our training wheel, our building block, and that thesis being towards the end of the paragraph. What has started to happen for some of us, and there's nothing wrong with it at all, is that our thesis statements are kind of going beyond this, where we might have multiple sentences being the thesis, kind of like a compound thesis, and that's perfectly fine. And it's not that it has to be a simple sentence, but I do think there is some benefits with that for the most part, where it really keeps your argument very focused. But some articles or passages or speeches that you're looking at might be a little bit more nuanced and might kind of require a lengthier sentence structure for your thesis statement than what a simple SPA could do. But there is absolutely nothing wrong with the SPA setup. This was one of the main building blocks that I introduced to you at the beginning of the course, and I'm certainly going to stick with that. And really this last part here for constructing that rhetorical analysis, the hope is that it's going to orient, especially if this might be content that could be unfamiliar to the reader, engage, focus the reader by presenting some kind of attention-grabbing device or just overall context. So there could be quotations, some kind of intriguing statement that might be offering some insight that wasn't otherwise there. There could be a personal anecdote that could be going along with the content of the passage, or even not a personal anecdote, but maybe even some kind of your own allusion that would be happening. Questions, and not that you want to start the essay off with a question, but certainly could be looking at questions that are being investigated based on what's happening with the rhetorical analysis. And then there's statistics, contextualized information, or scenario. These last three could certainly be kind of tough to do with a rhetorical analysis, just because statistics are not going to be at your access, based with a TWA AP exam, and the scenario could be a little bit lengthy to kind of get into. But contextualized information is something that certainly could be taking a look at based on the time period, the era of when the document was presented or the speech was given. And this isn't something that is absolutely necessary, but it is certainly something that kind of helps ground the reader and get a better understanding of what the hope, the ultimate goal is of the author or speaker of that passage. Now, keep in mind, the tricky part is this should not really take you more than 5 minutes. 5-6 minutes max is what you would want to be looking at for a rhetorical analysis introduction, and really for any kind of introduction, because you want like maybe 5 minutes, 5-6 minutes for that intro, and then you're in that 15 to 20 minutes probably for each body paragraph with the hope of doing a conclusion. So if I have 5-minute intro, a 15-minute body, another 15-minute body, then a 5-minute conclusion, I'm right there at 40 minutes. And I know that I have some reading to do. So, the hope is that this should not go beyond those 5 minutes. So if to complete all of these things is going to take you more than 5 or 6 minutes, 8, 9, 10, you're probably going to want to scale back and just go with a good introduction that's going to get the job done, as opposed to including all of this information here that's going to help to orient, engage, or focus the reader. But if this information is there for you, if this content is within your realm while writing, it would be a good idea to include. But don't go beyond those 5 minutes, because then you're dealing with a ticking time bomb of not being able to complete the assignment as a whole. Here's the rubric, that we've been using really all year long when it comes to the rhetorical analysis and all the AP exam questions. And the categories here we're pretty familiar with at this point, where we have our thesis, we have the evidence and commentary, and we have the sophistication. I have a big question mark here, because what is not included here is the introduction. There's not a line where this is what your introduction, how it's going to be graded. Certainly this first point here with the thesis, it was probably going to be in your introduction. So the question could be, why should I put more time and care and consideration, or effort, if not time, but more thinking into my introduction if it's not part of the rubric? Well, we know that sophistication point is. And so really that introduction can be a gateway to that sophistication point, where if you are able to kind of get into the complexities that are present within that passage and highlight that in your introduction, it could start to certainly lend itself to better commentary, analysis, evidence within those body paragraphs, and then all those in line could certainly work together to get the sophistication. A basic intro could still get that sophistication point, no doubt, but a great intro, one that is really strong, probably has a better chance of being able to get into this realm than what would be occurring with just a basic, simple kind of introductory statement or paragraph. So by really going with a great introduction, it gives us a better opportunity to get that sophistication. So here's going to be our reference point. This is a prompt from the 2018 exam. So this is from 2 years ago. You see the rhetorical analysis question was, in 1997, then United States Secretary of State Madeleine Albright gave the commencement speech to the graduating class of Mount Holyoke College, a women's college in Massachusetts. Read the following excerpt from her speech carefully, then write a well-developed essay in which you analyze the choices that Albright makes to convey her message to the audience. And I have a copy of this passage, this prompt in this passage within the assignment here for the Edpuzzle, so you could certainly bring that up. I didn't put the whole entire passage on here, just the prompt that we were going to be taking a look at, but now would be a good time to kind of pause the video for a little bit if you need to look over the prompt. You're not going to be writing the essay, but we're going to be taking a look at some introductory paragraphs so you get a sense as to how it would work. And it's still important to know the passage as a whole based on the information that she's presenting, the rhetorical devices that you are recognizing, to see how well that kind of matches up with some of the ideas that are going to be presented in the sample intros that we're going to take a look at. So take a few moments. We've looked at the passage, or we've looked at the prompt, excuse me. Read the passage, get a sense for what's going on, jot down what you think your rhetorical devices would be, and kind of highlight, annotate those, because that's going to get ultimately submitted to me as well when you're done with this assignment. So read the passage, highlight some rhetorical devices that you would look at, and then we'll be ready to take a look at some introductory statements here in a moment. All right? Okay, so hopefully you took some time to take a look at the passage. Here are 2 introductions that were done a couple years ago for this specific prompt. What we're going to do is, take a look at them. And again, you're going to take a moment to kind of read these on your own. I'm not going to read them in their entirety to you right now, but I want you to read both and highlight or at least make note of what concepts, ideas are the same or very similar between these 2 examples. So what are some similarities? And this can be basic. It could be words, but certainly also concepts as well. But it can be very literal here. What is some repetition that you see in both of these introductions that do make them, for the most part, very, very successful? All right. So on your copy, again, that is with the passage, take a look at these and highlight things that you see as being similar. And you can even kind of label in your mind what is similar about these concepts. What are they both doing? All right. So what elements are similar in both introductions? Pause the video, and then you can start it up again once you're done with your analysis. All right, so we can see here that we have a lot of things that certainly in common. Number one, for both passages, not that they're the same, but I certainly want to kind of highlight the devices that they're taking a look at. Firstly, alluding to recent accomplishments in history across the world, then by shifting to an encouraging rebuttal regarding doubt, and finally by calling her audience to action in the name of progress. We see these are the choices that this author is taking a look at. So we have allusions that are going on, and then we have a little bit of, a couple things happening where encouraging rebuttal regarding doubt. So there's certainly a counter argument, a rebuttal that's being introduced, but there's an encouraging tone that's happening. And then there's that push, calling her audience to action in the name of progress. So emphasizing this idea of progress that needs to be done. Over here on the second one, by referencing the efforts of marginalized women who are fighting to make a difference, utilizing powerful diction and repetition, and illustrating American efforts to improve the world. Both certainly I would think looking at similar content and areas within the passage, but you can see how they are using some different devices in both cases. But up above, before, Madeleine Albright, 1997 speech, graduating class, Mount Holyoke College, even if met with opposition. And we take a look at over here, Madeleine Albright's commencement speech, 1997, Mount Holyoke College. In her speech that's being presented, which we have over here as well, inspires, talking to graduate students, persevere, even if kind of met with opposition. There's going to be a link that's happening there. We have graduate and graduating. So literally there is repetition of word choice. And very specific ideas, and even in some cases, simple ideas. Do notice spelling. This person spelled Madeleine Albright's name incorrectly. That's not going to be a make or break situation that would be happening with the passage, but it would always be good to go with the correct spelling of your speaker or author that you're looking at, paying attention to those details. But with this repetition, even though the thesis statements are different, what is very much the same from a contextual element standpoint of the introduction? It's all of those things that you were talking about, a couple of weeks ago with the sophistication point. It is that rhetorical situation. So whether you're taking a look at the soapstone or we're talking about message and the exigence and whatnot of the passage, these folks are certainly making sure that the speaker is identified, the audience is there. What is the purpose that they're trying to look at? What is it that the overall message is? For that idea of perseverance, they're highlighting all of this within the introduction. So your introduction is a good place to certainly lay the framework for that rhetorical situation. So think about, as you're doing your introduction, who is the writer, who is the audience, what is that writer or that speaker trying to do with the audience in order to persuade them to accomplish the purpose and the message that author or writer is setting out with. So identifying all of these things is a nice way to really kind of ground yourself so that you know what you're going to be writing about, but also the reader as well. So I want to kind of highlight that rhetorical situation aspect here before we really kind of taking a look at good intros and great intros. All right, so remember, good intros, the essentials, it's done quickly, it's reflecting competent knowledge of the task, you're doing what it is that you're supposed to. Ways that you can kind of orient or focus your audience: introduce the text, introduce elements of the rhetorical situation, I'd say probably 3 or 4 of those elements of the rhetorical situation, and make sure you include a thesis. So we take a look at this one. In her 1997 commencement speech to Mount Holyoke College, Secretary of State Madeleine Albright connects with her audience through parallel syntax, repetition, assertions, and other tactics to convince her audience that they have an opportunity to change the world and break through the glass ceilings around them. This is a good introduction. It does everything that we kind of said here so far, as it has the essentials that are done. It's reflecting competent knowledge of the task. It's reflecting competent knowledge of the passage, understands what Madeleine Albright's overall objective is. And it gets the job done. It's probably done quickly. It's introducing the text. It's introducing aspects of that rhetorical situation. It has a thesis. What it does not do is it's probably not 2 to 3 sentences. You take a look at this one, it is only one sentence. But within that one sentence, it does all of these things that are necessary. We have, basically our thesis, our rhetorical devices well, the whole thing's a thesis, but we have the rhetorical devices, the parallel syntax, the repetition, the assertions, and other tactics. Yes, these two things are very similar, parallel syntax and repetition, but there can be different elements of that repetition that could differ from parallel syntax. So these are close to one another, but they still could be different devices when it comes to the overall body paragraphs. However, assertions and other tactics, the way of kind of setting up this essay would be to have these two together, parallel syntax and repetition, because they would be similar, and then you could have the assertions and other tactics being in your other body paragraph. Notice a specific purpose, convince, that one word. What is she trying to do? She's going to convince her audience that they have an opportunity to change the world and break through the glass ceilings around them. So when it comes to, this idea of orient, introduce the text, the rhetorical situation, what's going on so far as what the content of the speech is, we know that they recognize this idea about changing, not the word, typo there, change the word and change the world, and break through the glass ceilings that are around them. The rhetorical situation element being introduced here, we have the speaker, we have the audience, we know the context of what's going on, but really this kind of recognition of changing the world, not the word, really is probably the best part of that overall thesis. This is not anything that would discourage a reader. They might not be getting excited about reading the rest of the essay, but there aren't any major red flags that are happening. It's one sentence, but it does all those things that would be necessary. Great intros, which we've already talked about, are going to have that enrichment. It's going to take more time, can't take too much time, as we said, but you're going to be reflecting more sophistication, going beyond the basics, and you're writing more sentences, probably more in that 4, 5, 6, 7 sentence way. And by doing a great intro early on, it can help build your ethos, your credibility as a writer, your knowledge. They recognize that you are picking up on some things that other writers and readers of that passage, speech, prompt, whatever, may not. So ways in which you can engage your audience a little bit more is relate to that issue or context that is being presented. Find some kind of commonality that can bring you and your audience into that topic. You're going to incorporate the rhetorical situation just as was done before, but you're going to do so in more depth. So you're not just going to reference 3 or 4 components of that rhetorical situation or soapstone, but you're going to be getting more elements, like 5, 6 elements coming in. And then it's also good to try to demonstrate controlled writing. In simplest terms, what does it take to be a good writer? You have a focused argument, you have evidence and support, and you know how to write. And so demonstrating controlled writing through bold ideas or vivid language and words and using your own kind of stylistic manners where you're not trying to overshadow the passage, but your voice, your natural style as a writer is coming across. That's a way in which you can certainly engage your reader, build a stronger introduction, and hopefully that can carry out into the rest of the essay so that it does not have that overall kind of just robotic feel, I don't want to say the rest of the essays out there, but it's showing more thought process than just what a typical standard essay would. Now, this is something that cannot just be, generated on a whim. This is going to help through an understanding of the passage and being cognizant of that rhetorical situation, the audience, and all of those things so that you can kind of tap into those ideals. You notice right away this is a lengthier introduction than the one sentence one that we were just looking at before. We have come a long way since women gained voting rights, yet we have not gone far enough as gender equality remains an issue unresolved. The glass ceiling remains unbroken, and women continue to fight on all fronts rights that they deserve, rights that should be inherent. Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, in her speech to the women graduating from Mount Holyoke College, emphasizes the need to continue this struggle and strive for gender equality. By contrasting hypotheticals and reality, providing examples and personal anecdotes, and strong repetition of the word persevere, Albright successfully conveys her message to these graduates that they must continue to fight for rights in face of opposition and that they will succeed. What do we have going on here? We got a lot of things. Number one, by contrasting hypotheticals and reality, providing examples and personal anecdotes, and strong repetition of the word persevere, we have our rhetorical devices, our rhetorical choices that Albright is using, where she's conveying her message to these graduates. In the opening, we have come a long way since women gained voting rights, yet we have not gone far enough as gender equality remains an issue unresolved. The writer is contextualizing, is relating to the argument itself. It's connecting the writer, him or herself, as well as the audience, the reader, to the issue that Albright is taking a look at. So when we go back to relating to the issue or the context, that is certainly happening here, where we've come a long way since gaining voting rights, but we have not gone far enough as gender equality remains an issue unresolved. The mention of voting rights is a signal of progress that has been made, aware of the context of the issue, but recognizing that more needs to be done. Now we have this mention here of the glass ceiling remains unbroken, and women continue to fight on all fronts for rights they deserve, rights that should be inherent. I forgot to include the word for. That's my mistake, not the writer's mistake. So assume it says FOR right there. So here we're having reference being made from the passage with reference to the glass ceiling. But, also you're getting more of the voice, the stylistic aspects where you can really kind of feel the passion that is being evoked here, that, continue to fight on all fronts for rights they deserve, rights that should be inherent. Purposely done or not, who knows, but we got a little bit of asyndeton going on where we don't have the use of and, we got that comma, and really this kind of gives it more, I think, of like a vocal kind of context to it, where it's almost more of that fist pounding that would be taking place for the rights that they deserve, rights that should be inherent, that repetition of rights, more like kind of a parallelism. So there is some sophistication of writing that is going on. Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, in her speech to the women graduating from Mount Holyoke College, emphasizes the need to continue the struggle and strive for gender equality. So that message, the purpose, what she is attempting to accomplish is certainly done there. There is more demonstration of understanding of that rhetorical situation in this introduction, in this paragraph, than what we had in the previous one. You see that we have two sentences here to start off. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5 right here. So it's not that we're writing 10 sentences or whatnot. It's 5 sentences, but they're meaningful, they're purposeful. It's building an understanding of the situation that Albright is addressing within her speech and what she is going to try to do to persuade her audience. So there's a better understanding of that overall rhetorical situation. It is more, if we're going to use a word, it's more sophisticated than what we had in that previous one. Again, the previous one was fine so far as getting the job done and could still successfully complete the task at hand, but this one is a more sophisticated response, or at least a beginning of a response, than what we had before. All right, so now for practice. I'm going to show you a couple, and I want you to decide which one is good and which one is great. They're pretty close, though, I would say, in the sense of the one that is good is pretty good. It's better than just good. It's pretty good. The one that's great is not superior. It's kind of great, but it's recognizing a little bit more of what the task at hand is for that introduction than simply what the good one is. All right, so here we go. In her impassioned speech to the women of Mount Holyoke College, Secretary of State Madeleine Albright inspires the students to persevere through challenges to overcome gender discrimination and ultimately make a change in the world, not the word. She strengthens the power of her speech through parallel structure, repetition of important values, and through personal experience with empowered women. Second one, United States Secretary of State Madeleine Albright stood before her audience of young women as an example of what some of the new graduates listening might aspire to be. She used her speech to plant seeds of how to live an impactful, selfless, worthwhile life in the young heads. By contrasting approaches to life, relaying inspiring stories, and urging graduates to aim high, Albright conveys to her audience that the noble path in life is one of challenges so that they will persevere and strive to change the world. So which one's good? Which one's great? First one is good. Second one, great. And it's not simply just because one is longer than the other. But here's what we have. Both we're taking a look here at the devices, the rhetorical strategies. Essentially becoming the thesis, parallel structure, repetition of important values, and through personal experiences with empowered women. So parallel structure, repetition of values, or repetition of values, not syntax like parallel structure, but repetition of ideas and personal experiences or anecdotes with empowered women. All right, 3 separate devices. Contrasting approaches to life, relaying inspiring stories, and urging graduates to aim high. So those are her devices that here she's using. One thing to kind of notice is she strengthens the power of her speech through and then mentioning the things here. Notice here, by contrasting approaches to life, relaying inspiring stories, and urging graduates to aim high, Albright conveys to her audience that the noble path in life is one of the challenges so that they will persevere and strive to change the world. Obviously, this is the argument, but contrasting approaches to life, relaying inspiring stories, urging graduates, we kind of have 3 different purposes that are going on. So if you notice some complexity within your passage where you don't think a one purpose verb is going to suffice for everything that you want to do, this writer does kind of bring in multiple ideas. And they're all grounded still that Albright is conveying to her audience about the noble path in life is one of challenges so that they'll persevere and strive to change the world. Kind of similar to what Abigail Adams was writing to John Quincy Adams, but they're able to kind of subtly tweak each paragraph or each component a little bit by having that different verb. So that does kind of give you an option here to do. This is the great one. And again, it's not far and away better than the first, but it's helped to kind of contextualize what's going. United States Secretary of State Madeleine Albright stood before her audience of young women as an example of what some of the new graduates listening might aspire to be. This helps to kind of bring the scene in for the reader. You can kind of picture Madeleine Albright standing there before the audience, before the graduates, about to kind of deliver what her commencement address is going to be. I think one of the nice things of language that this person uses is she used her speech to plant seeds of how to live an impactful, selfless, worthwhile life in the young heads. I do think the young heads is a little awkward so far as reading, but this idea of planting seeds, that figurative language that is getting used by the reader, or by the reader and the writer of the passage, but the writer of this response is able to be a little bit more stylized language. So it kind of resonates with the reader a little bit more. Still could be successful essay. But seems to be geared a little bit more towards that sophistication that would be taking place. Better understanding of that rhetorical situation as you're being able to kind of picture Madeleine Albright standing before them, having the audience being referenced. What is it that she's trying to do? Plant seeds. What's the overall message? That the noble path in life is one of the challenges, so they'll persevere and strive to change the world. You have that better context of the whole circumstances that are going on and being presented by the writer here. But I would say certainly both of these would be introductions that I would expect all of you to be able to do. But you can see just these little nuances that are happening in the second one over here on the left that makes it a little bit of a stronger introduction. So to kind of recap, constructing introductions for rhetorical analysis, you're introducing the subject and or the writer of the argument. You're going to have the argument's thesis, as we mentioned, with the SPA, typically toward the end of the paragraph. Doesn't absolutely have to be the final sentence. This should not take more than 5 minutes because otherwise it's going to detract from everything else that you're doing. But the hope is to really orient, engage, and focus that reader by presenting, some of these kind of concepts that we have here, whether it be quotations or anecdotes, contextualized information. Probably the one that would be easiest or most universal, I think, would be that contextualized information that would allow you to kind of see how the passage fits in with the grander scheme of things. So one of the sample introductions that we looked at talking about while voting rights had been gained, there was still a lot more to do for gender equality. That's doing a good job of contextualizing the passage and giving the reader information to understand what the writer or the author or the speaker is trying to do to be more persuasive to his or her audience. But again, you can't really take more than 5 minutes. So the hope is that by reading the passage and the prompt carefully, you start to recognize what is that overall context that's going on. The good thesis statements, or excuse me, the good introductions are going to have probably about 4 components of the rhetorical situation. And again, you could either be thinking of that in the soapstone way, or the writer, audience, exigence, context, purpose, message. You're certainly going to have a thesis. It's probably going to be about 2 to 3 sentences. But the great one, you're going to be having more about 5 components or so of that rhetorical situation. You still have your thesis. It's probably going to be 3 to 5 sentences long, and it's going to do at least one of the following. And that's what's going to provide that extra kind of, punch, that extra wow or pow factor in a sense with your introduction, where you're going to reference the broader context, incorporate your own style, include a scenario, or include some kind of striking statement. That planting the seeds idea is incorporating more of the style and is allowing that statement to really kind of resonate with the reader. So good, gets the job done. Great really kind of sets you up to be more in line with that sophistication point, which is, really going to be, I think for some of us, a make or break point, that if we can get that idea of how we can articulate our ideas effectively to the audience, it's going to go a long way towards having a positive score on that rubric. So here's your assignment that I want you to do. And I have the 2016 passage, and here's the prompt, but I have the passage available for you to take a look at as well. I want you to write an introduction for the prompt and submit this for Google Classroom. So you have your notes that you took, your little kind of highlighting that you did on the 2018 prompt, and then you're going to give me your own introduction for this prompt. So those are the 2 things that are happening. There is not a document that is set up. I have the assignment. You're just going to add your own document to that specific assignment, where it's just going to be an introduction. You need to certainly read the passage as a whole so that your rhetorical devices are going to be appropriate. I don't want you just picking random devices, but all I want is an introduction. And this really should be a fairly quick assignment, because I want you to take about 5 or 6 minutes. I don't want you spending half an hour on your introduction, because that's not going to be realistic. I'm not scoring the introduction, but I'll give you some feedback under the assumption that you wrote this in 5 or 6 minutes. So please don't go more than 10, or don't go up to 10. I don't want you going beyond 5 or 6. If it's a 1-sentence thesis or a 1-sentence introduction that gets the job done, like the previous or one of the earlier examples, so be it. But then take a look at it and figure out, all right, what could I add to this in another minute or so that would make it better? So just writing an introduction. So your prompt: on June 11th, 2004, Margaret Thatcher, former Prime Minister of Great Britain, delivered the following eulogy to the American people in honor of former United States President Ronald Reagan, with whom she had worked closely. Read the eulogy carefully, then in a well-developed essay, analyze the rhetorical strategies that Thatcher uses to convey her message. You're just writing an introduction. Give me 3 rhetorical devices, however you can see my 3 fingers. Doesn't mean that you would be able to do all the body paragraphs for it. Might mean that you might have a body paragraph where multiple devices come together, but try to give me at least 3 rhetorical devices that you would be looking for. You have your copy of the prompt that I already have here with the video link for you to take a look at, and then you can just submit in your own Google Doc or whatever kind of attachment you want to do what your overall introduction would be. I don't need this back with brainstorming or anything like that. The only passage that I need back would be the one that you did with the Madeleine Albright. All right. If you have any questions, let me know. We're just focusing on introduction. Next video that we're going to do, we're going to be taking a look at conclusion. All right. So just submit your introductions, and I'll give you feedback for those paragraphs. Have a good one.